And here we go to part 2. Let's start with psychologist then. Nelson Good, right? Courage. 3 themes. Identifies 3 dimensions of courage. Fear, appropriate response, and higher purpose, as well as 3 main themes in developmental process for learning courage. Courage is something we learn. When we're young, we learn through example. As we get older, we learn through experience and the benefits of behaving courageously. So we need to build confidence and self-trust. That is, if this is what you believe, and you've really spent some time asking yourself, why do I believe this? Do I genuinely believe this? Or simply do I believe this because other people will think better for me for believing it, right? And where's the importance now? Are we going to place it outside of ourselves? This is what people tell me to believe, and if I believe it, they'll like me. This is not then an act of courage, right? But if this is what I believe, and I've searched my soul high and low, and have a tremendous rationale for supporting my belief, right? Sticking to my guns then becomes an act of courage, right? Perceiving a worthy purpose. Do you know the difference when you're looking at purposeful action? Is it worthy of you? Is it part of a behavior that's supporting your approach towards your own authenticity? And then managing fear, right? And this is the next component. The fear must exist, right? Or we can't call it courage. But then how do we behave in the face of fear, right? So these are components of becoming courageous. But then other authors have looked at this, and here's 4 more, right? In terms of learning courage, Dungate and Armstrong believe that 4 more themes need to be added. Empowering decision making, right? But this is through good critical thinking skills, can go a long way in supporting courageous responding. Right? Intention and willing action, and that is operating from a position of intention rather than a position of reaction. So it's more and more ownership of one's behavior and behaving in a manner that's more authentic. Right? Opportunities to practice and persevere, and do we seek those out? I used to be tremendously afraid of public speaking. I know, you're like, seriously. Now, in middle school, in 9th grade, junior high school, I ran for junior high school president. And I ran against my good friend Steve. He and I were like almost best friends. And another guy, Wes Frachino. And I remember we had to give a speech in the assembly in front of all the students. And I got up to give my speech, and I actually froze. I was so scared, I froze and I couldn't speak. I got out 3 or 4 words, and then I had to excuse myself, and I had to leave the stage in abject embarrassment. I survived, right? I mean, my friend said, boy, you really screwed that up. And I'm like, yeah, I really screwed that up. I looked really stupid. I hate life, and that's just the way it goes. Steve didn't win. Wes won. Best man for the job, right? But opportunities for practice and persevere. Where did I really get a leg up on this? Well, when I went to school and I was at Merrillhurst College, I took a class in advanced public speaking. Yeah, I missed the public speaking class, but Patty allowed me to come into the advanced public speaking class. We did 2 weekends, all day long weekends. We did 2 weekends, and some of the speeches, we had to give 8 speeches. Some were impromptu. She said, okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. You have to give a 3-minute speech on blah and come back. And there was only 9 of us in the class, so it was a great environment to do this. Other speeches, we got the week to prepare for the next weekend. But I overcame because I had an opportunity to practice. And notice, it's a relatively safe group. I mean, it's not, giving a speech in 500 people, but it was still giving a speech, and I learned about courage, and I learned not to be afraid of public speaking at that point in time. And if I am afraid, to do it anyway. And just use the arousal that the fear creates, because the fear jacks you up. Just use that arousal, turn it around, and use it as energy to deliver your talk, right? So a lot of times we need to put ourselves in position that make us afraid, make us afraid, so that we can then practice being courageous. And we can do this in safer environments to begin with, and then expand it, right? And now public speaking really doesn't bother me. I'll speak in front of anyone. But then I have no shame, and I'm not worried about making an ass out of myself anymore, really. So ensure a sense of belonging and self-worth, and these are things that we do for ourselves, again, our responsibility. So courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. And thank you, Winston Churchill, for that, because he had plenty of courage to speak. There's no two ways about it. And he had to learn the courage to sit down and listen. This was not something he was necessarily good at, and it was his wife who admonished him, said, since you become prime minister and you're fighting World War II, you've become just a bastard to be around. And you need to think about how you relate to other people, and you need to shape up. And he did. And this is part of it, is that courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. That is the courage to allow the conversation to go in a direction that maybe you don't intend. Notice, I'm anxious because I don't know where the conversation is going to go. I'm anxious of the unpredictability. So I want to control. And controlling is not the courageous behavior here. What it is letting go is the courageous behavior in this example. Letting the conversation, listening to things that you might not like to hear. And you can imagine as Prime Minister fighting World War II, the Prime Minister of England, you may be making some decisions that didn't work out well or were decidedly unpopular. And you have to listen to your generals, and you have to listen to your cabinet members explain to you why you were wrong. And you have to sit there quietly. And you don't know how it's going to end up. And that's courage. The courage to allow people to confront you regarding your mistakes. Right? And Churchill's a great example because he made some tremendous mistakes, especially if you studied Churchill during World War I. He made some really boneheaded plays, right? But courageously came back and fought the Second World War, essentially in charge of it. Now, that's not to say that Roosevelt and Eisenhower didn't have anything about it, but it was Churchill who was holding the hard line, was carrying the water for a long period of time in the early years of World War II. So, homework 10. Here you go, guys. Is courage an emotion? And I want you to start thinking this way, because it's easy to say, well, it's an emotion, but I could easily argue, no, I don't know that courage is an emotion. It's a behavior in response to emotions. But courage comes with certain visceral and cognitive components, so maybe you want to call it, I don't know. And that's what I want you to start freaking thinking about, is how are you going to define an emotion? Remember the last assignment in this class, right? What defines an emotion? But then let's do the critical thinking aspect. Okay, if it isn't an emotion, then is it a trait or a characteristic? And what's my case for that? Or is it a behavior? And I'd like you to make a case for each of these. That is in the spirit of critical thinking. I'm not asking you to decide which is which. What I'm more asking you is, if courage is an emotion, how do you explain it or justify it as such? If courage is a trait or a characteristic, how do you justify or explain it as such? If courage is a behavior, how do you justify? Because once you get those three listed down, and now you reflect on them, you're going to become more informed with your relationship to courage and what it actually is. You're also going to become more informed about what is your criteria to classify something as an emotion. So this really is an exercise in critical thinking as much as anything. If it's not an emotion, then what are the emotional correlates? Okay, if it's not an emotion, then what emotions tend to be experienced in the presence of courage? Okay. Is fear anxiety the primary is fear anxiety the primary inhibitor of courage? Or is there something else? Tough question. It's going to take some reflection, and I hope this spawns some conversation between you and your teammates, right? If it's not a trait, what are the supporting traits or characteristics? Much like the other question, right? And if it is a behavior, is it domain specific, and how so? And again, what I want is, if you answer the question, is it a behavior? No. No, it's not a behavior, because I said it was a trait. That's not an acceptable answer in my book. Okay? What I'm saying, if it is a behavior, then run with it as a behavior, is it domain specific? That is, does it occur only in certain areas, or is it more general or more global? And if so, explain how. So right or wrong answers, there ain't a whole lot for a lot of these projects as you're looking at, and if you've probably discovered, what we're really looking for is the quality of thinking. Did you think it through? Questions about that, you guys? All right. So, I hope you have a great day. And we're going to close out here with a little bee borage. Beautiful plant, bee borage. I didn't successfully grow any this year. I started a few seedlings, but I guess the weather just wasn't quite right. I never got them really off the ground. But make a huge plant of the most beautiful pastel colors, bee borage. Just a fascinating array of colors between blue and violet or purple. And the bees, they call it bee borage for a reason. The bees love it. You can also make tea and other good stuff out of it. So if you're into your gardening endeavors, I'm a big endorser of bee borage, especially for the beauty and just taking some pictures. So have a great day. I hope that every day that goes by, you feel your courage and your resources that feed to courage build forever, and we become more courageous in our pursuit of this crazy thing called life. So you guys have a great day. Bye-bye.